Have you been tricked and lured into an unendurable trap? Is the system you live within impossible of changing? Will it always return to forms of tyranny? Do you want to hear an actual alternative version of reality that we could all create together? Well, I've got one for you. Hello there, you 4.5 million wonders. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. Do you know, a lot of the time people will say in the comments below, which I read, and I love reading because I want to stay connected to you, well, what would you do, Russell? What alternative systems are there? That's why on my podcast, Under the Skin, I frequently talk to people that have experience with alternative visions, philosophies, ideals, ideas, academic experience, personal experience from across the world, throughout history, various different systems and ideologies that could be deployed to change our reality. Notably, particularly, and in this instance, anarchism, which I spoke about at length with Ruth Kinna on Under the Skin. In this part of the conversation, Ruth Kinna explains why anarchism was dismissed at the point of its inception, how it lost the duel with communism and Marxism to be the dominant philosophy of the Russian Revolution, and how many of the ideas in anarchism, which is simply really democracy, autonomy, and self-rule by people for the people without centralized systems of power continually dominating us, has been obscured as a potential solution precisely because it could work. Stay to the end of this conversation and let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you up for real change? Do you want real change? Is this something you're willing to sacrifice for and work for? All of this is stuff that I need to know from you. Hey, by the way, did you know I'm appearing live across the UK from January to May next year? There's a link in the description if you want to come see me. Stay to the end of this video and let me know what you're thinking in the comments. I always read them.
The anarchist tradition that you're interested in is not necessarily abolitionist. It's not like smash the state, get rid of a national identity, get rid of all religion. These constructs are, by their nature, monopolising and tyrannical. That's not your position. It's just you inhabit those institutions differently, or do you think there is some need for abolition?
So I haven't got an objection to people saying smash the state, but I think when you think about what that means and you accept that you're living within states, then you have to unpack what that smashing entails, because the states, you know, it's a huge and an abstract concept. So we have to sort of try and break it down. If you don't like the idea of the state, tell me what it is you don't like about it. Is it the fact that it empowers some people to tell you what to do and how to do it and when to do it?
That is a bit of it.
Exactly. So it's about the kind of social relations that we enjoy or we don't enjoy, because relationships are structured in particular ways and we associate that with the state or with statism or with authority. So if we think about it in terms of the social relationships, then we can start thinking about, well, okay, so if you want to smash the state, how do you do it? Well, you change the kinds of social relations you have. And we can think about that, you know, quite practically in any kind of institution that we inhabit. We can think about it in a university. We can think about it in any workplace. We can think about it in a school. We can think about it in a nursery. We can think about it anywhere, such that we're always trying to combat the concentration of power that allows someone else to command, boss, and dictate what somebody else should do.
Wow. Concentration of power. So say like that we were... I know of some anarchist organisations that probably wouldn't even declare themselves as such. Primarily I'm speaking about some 12-step organisations that have creeds such as each group is fully autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or our organisation as a whole. Leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. Leadership positions are temporarily hold, all democratically elected and terminable, like a 3 months, 6 months, a year, then that person's jogged on. So, but why, like there's loads of questions, but one is, why has anarchy had such bad PR? Why is there no iconic, heroic figure of anarchy that's like, this is the anarchy woman or man, and where has it been successful, and can you talk us through an example of how it might work in a sort of a reasonable and visible example?
Okay, so we'll start with the negative. Yeah. It's difficult to work out exactly why public opinion is so hostile, but it's always been the case. So right from the point when anarchists started to organise and call themselves anarchists. So we're talking from the 1840s to the 1870s. They attracted a bad press. And I think it's partly because of the ways in which anarchists expressed their critique. So they were talking primarily, I suppose, not to the old autocrats or the aristocrats or the sort of the old landed. I mean, they didn't like that either. But the people that they most upset were those that they had something in common with. And they were talking really to Republicans and liberals who they accused of failing to deliver on revolutionary goals. So the standard kind of historic goals of equality, liberty and fraternity. And what they were saying was that, if you're serious about those goals, then you can't organise in the way that you're organising. You can't defend the constitutions that you've set up. Because fundamentally what those constitutions do is structure inequality and bring enmity between people by protecting the right to private property. And for as long as you do that, and for as long as you use the law to uphold that relationship, you're forever going to have masters and slaves. And you can tell me, as a liberal or a Republican, that you've abolished slavery, that you abhor that kind of relationship, but actually what you've done in your constitution is that you've formally abolished the ownership of people, but you've now put most people in a relationship of enslavement by forcing them to work for others on the owner's terms. So that's a pretty devastating critique, because it suggests that everything that the liberal or the Republican state defends in terms of rights, democracy, at that time there wasn't any democracy, but certainly in terms of rights, was a fiction. And not only that, compared to other socialists, the anarchists refused to contemplate entering into these systems in order to change them, because they believed that the systems themselves were inevitably corrupting. So unlike social democrats, unlike other socialists, and certainly some of the socialist currents that come from, they're informed by Marxism, they refused to think in terms of organising political parties, and they always advocated direct action. And as soon as you put yourself outside of the systems and you say, one, I'm going to fight your systems because I think they're wrong. Two, I'm going to expose the values that you hold dear as being false. And three, and I'm going to fight you by methods that you don't approve of. It's perhaps not surprising that anarchists get a bad name. They look like they're irrational. They look like it's easy to demonise them as irrational. They look like they're outlaws. They look like they just want to destroy. And that's how they're portrayed, even before anarchists do anything that's remotely controversial. And there are controversial things that anarchists do historically. But even before any of this happens, anarchists are being demonised as outlaws and criminals and people who need to be dealt with repressive force.
It's interesting how many norms are called into question by even the basic tenets that you have introduced, and seemingly polar philosophies or ideals such as liberalism, republicanism, conservatism, socialism, capitalism, Marxism are rendered as being part of a quite limited attitude and quite a materialistic and commodifying attitude towards, people and resources. It's so it's not surprising. But why do you think that there is? I know there are sort of key figures in anarchy, but do you think it's because of this reluctance to participate in existing institutions and systems that it's difficult to establish a narrative and icons? I think the other thing that makes it difficult to establish icons in the anarchist movement is that anarchists themselves don't really like leaders. So, right. One of the things that anarchists like is leaderfulness, the idea that we all have capacity and that no one can speak in our name, and that, there's no
if you're denying a single source of authority as being legitimate in the state, then you can hardly sort of start constructing this in your own organisation. So although anarchists certainly refer to a lot of key thinkers and movements and events, they tend not to say, this is the book that you should read if you're going to find out about anarchism. There's no equivalent of the Communist Manifesto. There's no equivalent of Das Kapital. There's no equivalent of, I don't know, J.S. Mill's On Liberty. There are just endless discussions and texts and exchanges. So it's difficult to point to single figures.
Because it's antithetical to one of the central ideas.
That's right, that's right. But I mean, and the other thing that's, I suppose, interesting about the anarchists is that those who did become respectable, if you like, tended to become respectable in ways that detached them, at least in the public mind, from their anarchism. So it's not well known, for example, that Leo Tolstoy was associated with the anarchist movement, and that his work is thought of as being Christian anarchist.
Cool. Well, do you agree with me? Do you have enough hope in you, enough faith to work for something like anarchism? Would you like to take over your schools, hospitals, communities, run things differently? Should the people that work and use facilities run them? Do you see the way the world is being hollowed out? Every high street a hollow imitation of reality now? Can you see it happening? Let me know in the comments. Give this video a like. Please subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell, because I need you to know what I'm thinking when I'm thinking it. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at this cheeky little guy, and have a look at this too on my Awakening side channel, where I talk about personal development so that we can get ourselves in the correct shape to embrace the kind of changes that are going to be necessary. Sign up for my mailing list as well. It's just one click away, and please come and see me live if you can. Stay free.